Welcome to another segment of provocative conversations destined to provoke further thought and spark greater questions regarding God, church, and the religious establishments of both the past and the present. I am the proud heretic, Mr. Provocateur himself. Hello. I am the proud heretic, Mr. Provocateur. I am the one whose mission it is to provoke, to convict, to convince those who are to be provoked, convicted, convinced of whatever it is you are to be provoked regarding, convinced of, convicted of, or in. Today we are beginning coming to a final recording, topical recording that is. There will be a few messages within this particular topic. The subtopic of the divine season of the pandemic, another subtopic. This is should be the 10th subtopic. This message here will wrap up, this topic here will wrap up the divine season of the pandemic, not as a whole, because God has not necessarily ended whatever he's going to say to me regarding this season, I'm sure. But this whole set of messages, this whole series of messages in relation to the season of the pandemic, the divine season of the pandemic, is like an intro into all that God, some of what God is doing in this season. A lot of it is topical. A lot of it is just the surface of what will be. There will be other people, I would suspect, who will come forth with even more in-depth time periods and substance, I would think. But it is what it is. I'm only here to give what God has given me, and I cannot give you what God has not given me. Balaam and Balak. Balaam said to Balak, I can't give you what God hasn't given me to say to you. Only what God says to me can I say to you. I can only give you what I heard him say. Why he didn't give me more, I don't know. But I can tell you this. This was so much information for me to take in that it was very, very draining for me to receive this information, for me to have this information imparted into me with an understanding or with a greater understanding. It was a lot for me to lay out these recordings and to sit here tirelessly and tiringly putting this information out for those of you who need to hear what God is saying, what God is doing, for those of you who trust to some degree what God is saying through me, to me, through me, for you, for us all. Listen, I don't declare to know it all. I only know in part. And that's what I'm sharing with you, what I know in part. It is what it is. The title of this message, this particular topic, subtopic, is it really comes from what God was saying to me, how God laid out to me what he's saying and what he's doing, or what God made mention of to me in the things he stated or said to me. The topic of this message is many will not hear or believe the message. Many will not hear, or should we say, many will neither hear nor believe the message. Many will neither hear or believe the message. Period. God let me know that a lot of this is hard, and a lot of people are rebellious, and they're just not going to hear. They will neither hear nor, not or, but nor, they will neither hear nor believe the message. They will neither hear nor believe the message. Let's just jump into it, okay? As we know by now, God has given me 23 different messages, in depth, a lot of detail, topical detail, sub middle ground detail, somewhere within the depths of what will occur, but not deep, not so exact where there are literal dates. He just told me about the month of September, the month of November, but not necessarily like saying on December the 20th. No, I didn't get that, at least not yet. And I'm not about to make up anything. I'm just going to tell you what he said, how he said it to me. And it is what it is. And for those who have an ear to hear what God has said to me. Okay, here we go. On March the 13th, I'm only pulling out of the particular 23 times that God spoke to me in detail. He spoke smaller things to me throughout, but in detail, I'm only pulling out the things that are relative to the topic that I have in front of me now. The topic that many will neither hear nor believe. You can really say will neither heed, or you could say hear or heed. Okay, many will neither hear nor believe the message. They just won't believe it. They won't hear it. They won't believe it, and they surely won't take heed to it. On March the 13th, God said something to me, and it began to let me know that I sometimes if you just listen to what God is saying to you, he will show you, you can follow the words that he's saying, and those words will be a telltale sign of what you're getting ready to go through. Yes, there'll be telltale signs of what you're getting ready to go through. And God began to warn me, and he began to say things to me that were the telltale signs of what I would experience. You don't want to believe it. If God says, now I want you to know that I'm with you. Don't forget that I'm with you. I'm going to be right there with you. You'd be like, all right, I got you. But what you don't realize is that God is saying, hey, what you're getting ready to go through is going to be so rough. You need to know beforehand that I'm with you, that I'm right there with you, because apparently you're going to feel as though he's not. The pressure is going to be so great until it's going to feel as though you're in this alone. And God is giving you an indicator. Now, God, when he says stuff like that to me, I'm like, wait. No, God, no. Does this mean that? And more than likely it does mean exactly that. So when God began to tell me things about people not hearing, and people won't hear, and they won't believe, and they won't take heed, I realized then, I'm going to have to bring messages that are not going to be received. So this is where we are. March the 13th, 2020, God said to me, trust your experiences. Okay, trust my experiences. All right, I'm going to trust my experiences, God. Okay. He says, trust what I am teaching you. You are in the right path. Do not worry about what others do not agree with. Do not worry about what others are teaching. Let them do what they do. Let them believe what they believe. Let them have what they have. Let them have what they believe. But you continue to teach what I am telling you. You continue to teach what you are hearing. You continue to believe what you believe. You will be affirmed. You will be received. There I should have known when God was saying, I'm going to affirm you. You will be received. It's like, oh man, does that mean I should have known that? Not does that mean, but that means that I'm gonna not be received by a whole lot of people, and that, it's gonna feel like none of this is real and that it's all just made up stuff. Him saying you will be affirmed. He says people will receive you. People will hear you. They'll hear you through. I hope some of you are those who have heard these messages through, from the introduction all the way down to where we are now. There'll be one more set of messages that I will record. They kind of go with the type season this is, but what I want to do is I want to bring in the power of the seed, the sowing and the reaping of a thing. And I'm not talking about money, so don't you get scared. People will receive you. People will hear you through. People will have to come to hear you through. He says there is a group that will hear you. Are you a member of that group that God is talking about? There is a group that will believe you. Trust that their hearing will not be of them. Their hearing will be of me. Their seeing will be of me. Their believing will be of me. He says, do not be afraid of who will not get with you. Do not be afraid of what they may say. There it is. I should have known something right there. Just trust your course. Trust that your course will lead you in the right direction. He said, trust that the course that you are in, or trust the course that you are in, the direction that I'm taking you. He says you have to understand that people do not know what you know. Okay, so it's harder for people to get with this, to believe this, because they don't know what I know. They don't know all that you've given me, God. They don't understand all that transpired in my experiences, in the divine teachings, the revelations, the years of revelations that you've given me that led me up to this point, of being able to hear, up to this point of being able to see what I see, how I see, and when I see. He says people are not seeing what you are seeing. You are not wrong in what you're seeing. You are not wrong in what you are hearing. You have to trust your seeing and your hearing. You have to trust that you are in the right direction. So God was saying to me, look, I didn't realize it then. I didn't know what he was talking about. I was just, he was saying, look, people are going to be talking some crazy stuff. They're going to be putting out some crazy stuff, but don't you get caught up on them. You listen to what I'm telling you. I'm saying this is what God said to me. I'm not telling you all that. You listen to what I'm telling you. You take heed to what I'm saying. And just know that you're seeing what you're supposed to see. And that they don't see what you see. Just know that you're not wrong in what you're hearing. And trust what you're seeing. Trust what you're hearing. Trust that you are in the right direction. I would always often say, God, I've come too far. I don't want to be misled now. I've come too far. I've worked too hard. I've sacrificed too much. I don't want to blow ministry, if you want to call it that. I don't want to blow what it is I'm to do. I don't want to blow my credibility. So God, I don't want to get this far and then lose out, lose whatever. But anyway, bottom line is I do what is necessary to try and hear God in the most, in the clearest form that I possibly can in the moments that I do. I don't pick and choose when God speaks to me. God determines when he speaks to me. It is what it is. Sometimes I'm asleep and he'll tell me to get up. I'm trying to talk to you. Or I'm getting ready to talk to you. I'll get up and go wash up and go to the computer and begin to sit there and let God do what he does. But it is what it is. I don't know when he's going to do it. Not necessarily. Then there are times where I know, oh boy, I feel God. He's getting ready to talk to me. I sense it. I sense it. He's going to talk to me. I know either it's going to be tonight or tomorrow morning. I feel it. I feel it. I feel it. But anyway, March the 24th, he said to me, even when it comes to the things that I have said to you in relation to the season that you're in, what you are hearing is true. You heard the truth regarding this season, because March 24th was just 6 days after, about 6 days, roughly 6 days after me coming into the revelation that the things that God was saying to me for the last year and a half had to do with where I am now and where the world is now. But I did not understand that. So God was saying, listen, you heard the truth regarding this season. You've heard and you are hearing what is truly the case. He says you're hearing what is truly going to be. You are hearing what is going to be. You are actually hearing what is occurring both around and within you. Do not doubt what you are hearing. Do not question what you are hearing. Believe what you are hearing and believe that you are hearing. He says you do not have to concern yourself with who does not hear what you are hearing. I should have known right there that God is saying, hint, hint, there's going to be some people. It does not matter, he says, who is not speaking what you are speaking, what I am speaking. It does not matter who does not line up with you, with what I am speaking to you. It doesn't matter. But you feel a certain kind of way when you're not received, because I guess there's that part of us that wants to be received, especially when you have a burning set of words from God, some utterances from God that you say, look at here. And then they don't even want to hear it. They don't even want to believe it. They don't even want to mess with you. They think you've lost your mind. God says, what I am speaking to you is what I am speaking to you. What I am speaking to you is what I am speaking to you. Go with what I am speaking to you. It's like, I'm not going to change the message. I'm not going to give you something different. What I'm speaking to you is what I'm speaking to you. Go with what you are hearing from me. Go with what I am saying to you. He says, I am speaking to you. I am speaking the truth to you. I am speaking what I am saying to you. I am saying to you what will be. I am telling you what will be. This that you have heard is to be trusted. This that you have heard is to be spoken. You are to speak what you hear. You are to speak what you are hearing. Speak what is going forth. Speak what you have heard. So I try to stay in what I've heard and not with what someone else has heard. Speak what you are hearing. Speak what I am telling you. Speak exactly what I am telling you. That's why I'm reading to you all exactly what I put down. Do not let others sidetrack you. Do not let others get you off track. Stay on course. Stay on course with what I am saying. It's basically, I believe God was saying to me, don't go listening to other people. Don't listen to what other people are saying necessarily and get off track. Now, there is one particular person that I get with, and I am amazed at that person's exactness. I really am. I am amazed at the fact that we both are talking along the same lines. We differ in some areas, but not necessarily. We may see more than each other. I may see more than him in one area. He may see more than me in one area. It is what it is, but I like what he's doing. There are some things that I'm struggling with, but not necessarily with his exactness. Some things that I'm struggling with that whatever. Do not let others sidetrack you, God says. Do not let others get you off track. Stay on course. Stay on course with what I am saying. Stay with what I am saying to you. Stay with what you hear. Stay with what you have heard. Do not go off course. Do not get off course with what I am saying to you. He says this season is not the way that others are thinking, because this is March. This was March. What date was this? This was March 24th. So it was early on in the pandemic, and I'm only 6 days into knowing what God is talking about. And he's saying to me, listen, this season is not the way that people are saying it is. People began to say that this is a season of prosperity. This is a season for the church. God is getting ready to bring a great influx into the church, and we're going to bust at the seams, and we're going to come out of it. We're going to come out of this, and we're going to come out of that. And God says, this season is not the way that others are thinking. I even heard one prophet, and you really bothered me, and I want to call your name so bad, but I won't call your name, and I'm just flabbergasted at you. You made me question what God said to me when I heard you, and I didn't know what you were going to say, but I just know that because you've come to our church several times, or the church that I was attending at the time several times, I knew that, well, let me hear what he has to say. You just happened to pop up on YouTube what I was looking at, and you were at a particular so-called famous preacher's place, and you were preaching, and you stated how all of these prophets missed it, and somehow you didn't, and that we're seeing the end of this, and this thing is already gone. We just got the residue left over. And I'm like, what is you talking about? Where is you getting your information from? And I knew something wasn't right. But anyway, this season will not play out the way that others are thinking it will. This season will be like no other. There will be no other season that will match what is going to be in this season. This will be a season that will parallel no other season in history, God said. This season is not what other people are thinking it will be. This season is not what others are speaking it to be. What people are thinking and what people are speaking is not what this season is going to be. Many people are thinking and speaking beyond me, God says. Many people are thinking and speaking beyond anything that I am thinking and saying. He says their thinking and their speaking are beyond me. He says the direction that people are being led to believe is not what will be. I am not going in the direction that others are taking. That is not the direction that I am going. That is not where I am going. God says, I am not saying any of what others are saying. What others are saying is not what I am saying. What others are thinking is not what I am thinking. People are being misled within their own thinking. People's thoughts are misleading them, he says. People's religion is misleading them, he says. Their own thoughts, their own traditions, their own religious beliefs are misleading them into thinking in a direction that I am not going. People are misleading. People are misleading others. People are misleading others to believe what is not true. People are misleading others to believe what is not the case. He says, instead of believing, and I say he, we don't know the gender of God, but I say he because I have no other way. If I say it, that's a problem. If I say her, she, that's a problem. And he. And until I get a better understanding of that, a greater knowledge of that, because none of it expresses the totality of him, the person of him, the essence of. Instead of being led by me, people are allowing themselves to be misled and misguided. People are not allowing themselves to be led in this season. He says people are hearing every voice but mine. They're not allowing themselves to be led in this season. They're hearing every voice but mine. He says they are still not hearing me. They are still not seeing me. They are still not letting me. He says people have yet to go with the flow. People have yet to experience the flow. People have yet to discover the flow. Even though the flow of this season is currently happening, people are not acknowledging the flow. People are not even conscious of the current flow. People are not consciously aware of the current divine flow that is in process. People are not even cognizant of the fact that there is a current divine flow. He says people understand that something is going on. That much they know. People understand that something different is currently going on, but they have yet to put things together. He says people have yet to put things together in reference to the divine flow that we're in right now. He says people have yet to see my hand in this season. People are still fighting against this season, fighting against the direction of this season, fighting against the changes of this season, the closings of this season, the mask wearing of this season. He says they have failed. People have failed to see my hand in this season. He said they failed to see my hand in this season. My hand is at work. My hand is at work in this. My hand is in every bit of this season of events, but the people don't see. He says the season or this season is of my doing. This season is of my calling forth. I called this season forth, God says. I called this season into being. No one called this season into being but me. Wasn't China. It wasn't the Democratic Party. It wasn't the devil, Satan, Lucifer. It was none of that. None of it, people. Listen, it was none of that. Get that out of your head. It wasn't China. It wasn't the church. See, I helped you there, church. It wasn't you or that witch doctor or that whatever. It was none of that. It was none of them. Get out of that. Get away from them. It's more than that, and it's more than them. It's divine. It's divine. I know that messes with you because the church wants us to stay in that spooky realm. They want us to get over into that hell region of things, you know. But we can't let that happen. This is none of that. This was God. This was all God. Know that it was all God. Know that it is God. It is not this devil. It is not this demon. Satan has no play in here.
What a mighty God we serve. What a mighty God we serve. Heaven and earth adores him. Angels bow before him. What a mighty God we serve.
See how messed up we are? We fill our heads. We don't know if it's God. We don't know if it's the devil. You hear demons in your head singing, what a mighty God you serve. Look at what he brought you. I mean, come on. We don't know what it is. Is it the devil? Is it Satan? Is he sitting there laughing at us? I mean, is it God? What is it? We don't even know. We don't know. We're messed up. Yet it is for us to know. It's a bunch of noise. If all of that sounded like a bunch of jibber jabber and a bunch of noise and a bunch of mockery, that's what it is, because that's what our mind, that's what our religion, that's what our beliefs bring us to. All of that mess. It fills our heads up with all of that mess and we can't think straight. But God said, this is a season of my doing. This season is of my calling forth. I call this season forth. I call this season into being. The universe. No one called this season into being but me. I am the reason for this season. He says this season exists because of me. This season is because of me. It has its existence because of me. People do not believe in this season. People do not believe the sanctity of this season, the divinity of this season. People do not believe the revealings of this season in this season. People do not believe the leading of this season. They don't believe it. They don't believe the leaders, the doctors, the scientists, whoever that is to lead, that is. People do not believe that this season is being led by me. People do not believe that they are being led through this season divinely. People do not see the leading that is going on through this season. They don't see it. They don't see my leading. They don't see my hand. They don't see my divinity. He says people's intuitions and religious beliefs will cause them to go against the flow. Before their intuitions and religious beliefs ever lead them to go with the flow of this season, he says people will instinctively go against the flow of this season. And that's what you see people doing. They're going against all that is being spoken. They're not hearing. They're not believing the message, whether it's the message from someone such as myself or whether it's the message from Dr. Fauci or other doctors and scientists and all, they epidemiologists and all, they cannot get with it. He says people's intuitions and beliefs are misleading them against the flow. People are still going with their own intuitions, their own religious beliefs. Even the church is. He says, instead of going with the flow of this season, people are letting their intuitions and religious beliefs lead them during this season. Stop letting your intuitions, stop letting your intelligence, stop letting your religious beliefs lead you during this season. Be led by the flow of this season. Go with the present of this season. Live in your presence. Live in the presence of your now destiny. Go with the present words that are being spoken in this season, not necessarily words that were written in a book regarding other periods, other dispensations, other seasons. They were good. They're good for reference. They're good for principles, for greater character, for pruning. However, you got to listen to what God is saying in your now. And he's speaking that into you. The universe is presenting that to you. Instead of going with the flow of this season, people are letting their intuitions and religious beliefs lead them during this season. And they're ending back up in the church house, back up in the funeral house, back up in the hospital house, back into the prison house. You're being misled. You're letting self lead you. That could be good. That could be bad. In many cases, it's bad before it's ever good, even though it's all good. The natural flow of things will not be respected during this season. God says the natural flow of things will not be respected in this season. He says the normal flow of how things were before this season won't be. The season of yesterday's dispensation is different from the season of today's dispensation. He says today's dispensation has a different flow. Today's dispensation has a flow that is going in a different direction. He said the directional flow of yesterday's dispensational period is different from the directional flow of today's dispensational period. Remember, we're in a new dispensation in life, a new dispensation in humanity. This world, this universe is in a new dispensation. We've evolved into another period in time, into another way of living, another way of thinking, another way of behaving. We're in a new dispensation. He says this flow in this season is defiant to yesterday's flow. He says the flow of this season defies the flow of yesterday. Stop trying to pull yesterday into today. He says this current flow defies the flow of yesterday. The flow of this dispensation and season defies everything that was once considered as being normal. The current flow does not respect the normal flow of yesterday. For there is nothing natural or normal about the current new flow that you and I are in. He says the people, however, are stubborn. The people are set on doing what they have always done. He says the things of this period have yet to slow the people. He says the people will continue to do just as they have always done. He said this virus, these restrictions and all, they're not doing anything for the actions of the people. He said the people will continue to do just as they have always done. The people will continue to be all that they have always been: rebellious, disobedient, hard-headed, don't want to hear, don't want to take heed to anything that someone is saying to them. God says this is how it's going to be. When God began to tell me these things, I began to accept how people were fighting against wearing masks and against being told to go home and close up, being told that you can't go to the bar, that you can't go to the club, that you can't go to the whorehouse, that you can't go to the church house, the slaughterhouse, that you can't go to these places. And then the people began to say, to hell with that. Don't tell me what I can't do. You better get out my face. He says the people are stubborn, and they're going to continue to be all that they have always been. If you're looking for people to take heed in a certain out there and about, he says they're going to continue doing just what they've always done. Notice how the United States will not change and submit to anything and to the conditions of the virus. And even though right now in October of 2020, every state, they said, is headed in the wrong direction, and over 30 states are in the red, yet we just keep ripping and running and doing and slipping and tripping and dipping, and we don't care. God says the people are going to continue to be all that they have always been. That's why the United States is leading in every category, just as God told me they would. The United States is leading the world. The United States is on a world stage acting like a straight clown. But the hearts of the people is on display, or are on display, for the world to see. He says people will not respect the flow. They will not respect the direction of things. Listen, you see that every day now. He says the flow of this season will not be respected by the people. And it's not being. And here I am telling you all about a flow, a shift, the shifting that's going on. And I'm trying to tell you this here when God is saying to me, people aren't even going to respect this. But I still have to tell you. And that's the hard task of it all. He says people will continue to do as they have always done. People will continue to deal the way that they have always dealt. You're saying, well, surely people will change now. Surely they'll get it right now. Surely they'll do differently now. And wrong. God says, no, that's not the way it's going to happen. He says nothing will cause the people to do differently. When I hear doctors say, people, if we can still do this, we can still do that, we can do this to change the direction. I'm sitting there saying, no, you can't. I sit there and I yell at them. I know you can't. No, we can't. It's not going to happen. I already heard God say it's not going to happen. Now, will some do right? Sure. But all of this must be, and all of this behavior must occur. Nothing will cause the people to do differently, he says. Nothing will cause the people to see differently. It's almost like that storyline that was written regarding Jesus and the rich man and Lazarus, how the rich man, he supposedly went to the region of hell or whatever they want to say, and into the abyss or whatever. And he was sitting there saying, can I go back and warn them? And he was saying, well, look here. They have all the teachings that you have, and they have this one up there and that one up there. And if they want to hear, they'll hear. And he says, and even if you go back from the dead, they still not going to believe. You coming back from the dead is not going to make them believe. So people are going to continue to do just as they have always done. God says they're not changing. The people are not changing. They are not receiving the situation that is at hand. They are not even considering what is taking place. Some people are not even considering the reality right now. They're not even considering the truth of all of this right now. He says they are continuing to live as they have always lived. They are continuing to do just as they have always done. He says they are going about things just as they have always done. He says the pride of the people is so great. He says their pride has them speaking. Their pride has them thinking. Their pride has them doing. People's pride will not permit them to do what they are to do. The people's pride will not permit them to do as they should do. The people's pride will mislead them, is misleading them. The people's pride will be their own undoing. He said the people's pride is going to bring them to their own state of destruction. He said the people's pride is going to determine their own degree of self-destruction. He says pride is the destruction of self. Pride leads to the destruction of self. The people's pride will measure the level of destruction they will incur, they will experience. The people's pride will measure the level of destruction they will incur. Though some people's prideful destruction will not kill them, he says, it will definitely destroy them in many ways than a few. He says this is a time of self-destruction. This is a time where people will begin to self-destruct. This is a period where people will self-destruct like never before, simply because they won't hear, they won't heed to what is being said. This self-destruction that will take place during this season will not make sense. None of it will make sense. Look at how people are destroying themselves, saying, I want free face, not free willy, but free me from these masks, from this PPE gear. Free me from all of this enslavement of lockdown. Don't tell me that I'm on house arrest. The self-destruction that will take place during this season will not make sense. Why people are killing themselves this way by not wearing a mask. None of it, he says, will make sense, and it doesn't. And then on March the 29th, God, of course, began to speak on me again, and he says, you cannot warn the people enough. You cannot warn the people enough. Man, ain't you tired of doing this recording? Didn't you record enough? Didn't you get the people enough to work with? You're going to overwhelm them. Listen to what God said. You cannot warn the people enough. No matter how much you warn them regarding this season, people are going to continue to do as they have always done. They are going to continue to be who they have always been. And we're seeing this now, people. The church is not looking different. Politicians are not behaving differently. The world isn't behaving differently. The United States isn't necessarily behaving differently. They're only behaving as they've always behaved. He says you can only tell them. You can only warn them. You can only let them know what you know. But you cannot make them hear you. You can only tell them. Oh, how this played out. I wasn't experiencing this when God gave me this, but he was forthtelling to me. But I have experienced it since he's given me that. I have experienced it. I'm like, man, how can people be so blind? How can people be so deaf, be so tuned out? He says, the virus must complete itself. The virus is on a course that must complete itself. There is nothing that anyone can do to keep this virus from spreading. It must complete itself. It must finish its course. Now, people don't want to hear that. No one can rebuke either the virus or this season away. No one can pray this away. And then who knew that Kenneth Copeland was going to come some months later after the virus began and began rebuking it. He says no one can rebuke either the virus or the season away. No one can pray this away. No one can speak this away. This thing must run its course. The events of this season must go forth. The events of this season must occur. They must occur. He says this season is not going away. He says this season is not going away until it has gone its course. He says this season must run its course. He says there is nothing that anyone can do to turn back the things of this season. This season will complete itself. This season must run the course that is set before it. No human hands or human means will be able to stop the spreading of this here. And so it's not that if I just don't believe and if I just don't whatever, then it won't happen. It's no longer here. No, it is here and it's not going anywhere. So you might as well open your eyes and get with the program if you're going to make it through. He said the events of this season will spread. The events of this season will be widespread. Nothing that humans can do will stop the spread of this season. The spread of this season is inevitable. Inevitable. He says there will be many who will make it through this season and recover. But then there's going to be many there will be many who will come through this season and recover from it. However, there will be many who will not come through this season. Probably because they wouldn't listen. There will be many more who will not recover from this season. Many will not recover from this season. Many will not see their season after this season. Many will not have a successful recovery. And it's probably because they won't listen. He says, if recovery from this season were to be a complete success, then people would not benefit from the season itself. So we need the rejectors, apparently. The events of this season must be devastating. Must. In order for people to learn from this season, the events of this season must be crushing. That's what God said. He said this season is a learning event. This entire season is a learning event that is meant to teach. But you can't teach folk who won't hear, won't heed, won't listen. He says teaching will be wrought through the life events of this season. He says the life events of this season will be the teachers of this season. He said this is an eye-opening season. People's eyes will be open during this season. People's eyes will be forced open. People will attempt to hide from what they see in this season. They will attempt to hide from the devastation of this season, but they will not be able to. So you can sit and hide away from the messages, the divine messages that are being put out, at least by me. You can sit and blow that off all you want. It's not going to make anything go away. You might attempt to hide, but you won't be able to. This will be a season of truth, and that's what it is. This will be a season where truth will spring forth from every direction. Truth will begin to spring forth from every sector of society. Truth will begin to spring forth in devastating fashion. The truth that will spring forth will be devastating. It will have devastating effects. Maybe that's why people don't want to hear about it. But it's not going to stop it from occurring. The truth is going to destroy throughout this season. People will be destroyed because of the truth that will come forth during this season. People will be devastated by the truth that will come forth. People will be forced to admit the devastating truth of this season. The truth is going to destroy. Know that. People will be forced to see and admit the devastating truth that will come forth during this season. They'll be forced to see and admit the devastation that will touch every sector of every society during this season. No one will be exempt. Then on March the 31st, God says, you are correct in that people are being slowed in their process. I'm slowing people's process down, their lives down. People are being slowed in their process of becoming. Their process of becoming is being slowed tremendously in this season. He says prior to this season, people had become too actively involved in so many other things. He says people's lives were inundated with so much of little, so much of so little. When you a person who's small, you will think a small thing is everything. You will see the world only as big as your location. if you never expand outside of your general location. He says people had become engulfed in the things that were doing so little for their overall being. He said prior to this period, people were always on the go and never settled. People had become too mobile and active. People had become too used to being on the move, to being used, busy, to being busy. He says, even while in this period that we're in, people have become too used to being on the go. They are always on the go. They are always doing something. They're always running. They're always looking for and rushing to the next great thing. He says people are never taking the time to slow their pace in order to get what is before them. People continue to refuse to take the time to get what is being given to them. They are too busy to digest what they hear or take in what they have said. He says people's continuous movement is deafening. So much noise in your movements. Their daily activity is keeping them from hearing. You're doing all this other stuff. And you don't care what type period it is. You're spending all your time, resources, and energy on other things. And it's keeping them from hearing. People are too busy to digest what they hear or take in what they see. People's continuous movement is deafening. Their daily activity is keeping them from hearing. People are tone deaf due to their own movements. People's tone deafness is due to their own continuous activity. You can't sit still. So now your senses are dull to hearing. The people of this generation refuse to slow down enough to hear what is being spoken. People never stop to hear. They never slow down enough to actually hear what is being spoken. People are simply too involved in other things due to their day to hear, which is the reason why the people of this generation are not hearing and have such a problem with hearing. This is why there's a pause in the earth. That is why the earth is pausing. He says people will not be able to maintain their sanity during this season. He says the quietness during this season will be deafening. People will be deafened due to the quiet stillness of this season. He says the quiet stillness during this season will drive people insane. People will be driven to the point of insanity due to the quiet stillness of this season. So neither of us are there yet. He says during this season, the hearts of the people will faint due to their inability and their unwillingness to hear. People will literally lose their sanity during this season because of not hearing me, because of them not hearing what I am saying in this season. He says, my voice is to be heard. My voice is the only thing that will keep the people's sanity. His voice. My voice is to be heard and adhered to by each individual during this season. People's sanity during this season is dependent upon their ability to hear me. Unless people can hear me, they will lose heart during this season. This season will be a season that is beyond measure. This season will be stressing to the senses. The human senses will be stressed beyond measure. The human senses will be stressed beyond measure and stretched beyond measure. People will be demanded to hear from me during this season. People will have a greater demand to hear from me They'll demand to hear from me. They'll demand to hear. They're not doing it now, but they will. He says, as in no other season prior to this season. He says, during this season, people will demand to hear my voice. They will demand to hear what I'm saying. Yeah, but what is God saying? The sanity of your humanity is dependent upon the hearing of my voice to you. That is why I told you that you must speak. He says the only thing that will keep you from the point of insanity is for you to hear him, your ability to hear him, to hear what he's saying. This season demands the hearing of my voice, God says. Do you have the voice of God in your ear? Do you have someone who you consider appropriate to bring forth whatever it is you need them to bring forth to come to believe? Listen to those people in. Let those people be in your ears. This season demands the hearing of my voice. My voice will direct you in this season if you hear me. My voice will lead you in this season if you let me. My voice will keep you if you let it keep you. And then on July the 2nd, this is the first of two messages he gave me on that. He said, this is a season where people's eyes will be open. This is a season where people will begin to see clearly. This is a season where people will see clearly. This is a season where people will see. Hearing is an important aspect of this season. Hearing. This is a season that is full of hearing. Why? Because God is full of talking in this season. This season is filled with hearing. The need to hear during this season will drive the people. This season is filled with people's need for hearing. People will be driven to hear. People will have a strong need to hear throughout this season. Currently, God says the world is not hearing. Currently, the world is not trying to hear. Currently, the world is not wanting to hear. He says people's desire to hear, though, will be great. And even though the world is not desiring to hear, they will. The people will come to a point in this season where their desire to hear will be great. He says this season will create a desire to hear. People will desire to hear what is truth. They will desire to hear what is of substance. People will desire to hear substance of truth. There will be a great demand upon people who hold the truth. And I spoke regarding that. People are going to flock, even though they may not flock initially. As things unfold and as they begin to experience things and continue on in the transitioning of the shift, they're going to come and they're going to knock on our doors. Those of us who have substance. The days of little or no substance will no longer be accepted. People will no longer feed upon things that are not of substance, that are of no substance. This season will place a demand on people's substance. Do you have substance for the demand to be placed upon you? Substance will be demanded of those who speak during this season. You won't be able to get away with the craziness that you speak. You're going to have some substance. He says substance will be a requirement of this season. He says those who speak during this season must possess substance. Those who speak during this season must come forth with substance. People who submit to the rulings of this season will fare well. But those who rebel against this season will not receive from this season. Those who rebel against the flow will be trampled by the flow. He says there will be many who will go against the flow of this season and never recover. Those who snark at the flow of this season will succumb to the flow. There will be many who will succumb to the flow of this season. Your recovery in this season is in going with the flow of this season. Going with the flow of everything assures your recovery from this season. Go with the flow. This season will be filled with the temptation to go against what is occurring. He said, you're going to want to go against what's occurring because other things are more enticing than other things. He said this season will be filled with the temptation to go against what is happening. There will be much temptation to go against the flow of this season. This will be a season of utter rebellion, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing utter rebellion right now. Many will seek to go against the events of this season. Many will rebel against the direction of this season, and we see churches doing it. We see law enforcement doing it. We see schools doing it. We see sports teams doing it. It's out here. People will rebel against everything that is told to them during this season. People's hearts will not be open to receive what is said to them. People will reject what information is given to them during this season. They will continue along the path that has always been, the path of destruction. He says this is a dark period of self-destruction, and people will self-destruct because they won't listen. They won't take heed. This is a period where people will self-destruct. He said this is a period where self-destruction will become the norm of the day. Self-destruction will be the norm for this season, which is why you are seeing so many people go against what is being spoken to them. This will be a season where self-destruction will be the order of the day. Well, people, there you have it. There you have what God has spoken to me up to this point. We will continue on in the next recording. Until then, please heed to the advice of the medical authorities. Heed to the advice. Do what is necessary to get through.